All right, if you want to read this article, you can go to justinstellman.com/A17. 10 reasons you should not watch the news. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was outside skateboarding when I was a kid. It was getting dark, and I was worried that I was going to be kidnapped and killed. I was about 9 at the time. I remember thinking I have to hurry up and get home because the Night Stalker, a.k.a. the walk-in killer and the Valley Intruder, was in the middle of his alleged killing rampage in the area where we lived. I would watch Eyewitness News at 7 p.m. and they'd lead off with how many people Richard Ramirez had killed that day. I was freaked out. If we had never owned a television, I would never have known about what was going on and with this story. I never would have been living with so much fear. I grew up watching the news, and the more I think about it, the more bizarre it all seems to me. To this day, it boggles my mind that people sit down, sometimes while eating dinner, and watch what they call the news. I can't think of a more useless and fruitless endeavor, if you could even call it that, than sitting down and watching something that's going to make you feel fearful, sad, powerless, discontent, angry, and most of all, disconnected. And I used to do it willingly. Nobody forced me to watch the news. I wanted to feel informed about what was going on in the world. Many people find the feelings they get from watching the news very addicting. It's like a drug. These feelings help us continue to remain in a world of our own misery. We love to live there. It makes us feel safe, and we can construct a world in our mind that facilitates laziness and coddles to each and every one of our weaknesses, because that's home to us. And watching, quote, the news helps us feel like we have some kind of control again, even if it's not true. Now, having given up TV the past 10 years, I can say is one of the best things I've done for my own health and personal growth. Giving up TV, especially the news, has had more of an impact on my life than changing my diet, getting more sleep, working out, meditation, yoga, or any other health practice I've adopted. Television, and the news in particular, is like a parasite that enters your psyche and it invades your subconscious mind like a ravenous lion looking for food. It affects every thought you have and your general demeanor of how you view life. At least that was the case for me. Giving up this kind of TV watching has been nothing short of miraculous. Number 1, you're wasting your time. When I look back and consider the hundreds of hours per year I watch TV, I think about all the lost potential and just wasted time. I think about my dreams and what could have been had I used my time more wisely. The average 18 to 24-year-old in America watches roughly just under 1,000 hours of TV per year. That works out to about 38 days per year. This included all 24 hours of those 38 days as well. So if you extrapolate that out for 30 years, that means the average American person watches 1,140 days of TV. That's 27,360 hours that you'll never get back, ever. Consider. Think about what books you could have read. How would those books have affected your outlook on life? Think about all the time you could have spent with your family. What relationships could have been saved? Think about all the time you could have spent in meditation. What deep insights could you have made about yourself that would have improved other aspects of your life? Think about all the time you could have spent building that business but never had the time or energy. How much money could you have made with that business? How would you have been able to affect change in your clients or customers with that business? Think about the time you could have spent learning something new, like a new sport or a new language or even a new craft. What if you spent all that time learning something that could have saved your life or the life of others, like CPR or martial arts? Think about all the time you could have spent going on adventures like hiking or surfing or traveling. Who would you have met along the way that could have also changed your life? 1,140 days is a lot of life that went up in smoke from watching TV. If you combine that with the amount of time one sleeps, which is roughly about a third of your life, along with our short lifespans, you quickly realize there's not much time left. Number 2, it's bad for your eyes. There's no doubt that staring at computer screens, iPads, TV screens and cell phone screens damages our eyes over the long term. Humans were not meant to look at something at a fixed distance. Our eyes evolved to look at something close up and then something that's far away in various different environments. It just makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Looking at one thing for a long period of time is essentially a cast for your vision. In the same way that a cast on a broken forearm limits the outside world, anything on the outside of that cast, from re-injuring the broken arm, same too with looking at screens with fixed distances from your eyes. With a cast on your arm is only able to handle the reality between the skin and the cast, right? There's not much distance between those two. This is to protect your arm and let your bones heal. What happens as a result of wearing this cast? Well, the muscles in your arm get weak from atrophy, right? The same thing happens with an imaginary cast when we look at fixed distances that never change over long periods of time. The same could be said with the movement of our bodies while sitting in chairs and looking and locking ourselves into repetitive positions for hours on end. But that's a topic for another article. When the eyes become weak, we start to blink less, which prevents us from cleansing the various parts of our eyes with our tears. The act of blinking creates tears that do this for us naturally, much like saliva, earwax, and snot. On top of all this, the blue light emitted from screens prevents the body from creating melatonin, the steroid hormone that causes us to become sleepy, and it also prevents cancer among hundreds of other tasks in the body. As a result, we're not tired when we go to bed at night and don't get a restful sleep. Number 3, it's bad for your posture. Talk to any chiropractor and they'll tell you about the impending issue many people are going to have to deal with, which is called text neck. The upper cervical, where the medulla oblongata is, some people call this the mouth of God, gets misaligned over time from forward head carriage staring at TV screens. When we sit, we tend to look down and roll our shoulders forward. This puts many pounds of pressure on the muscles in the upper and lower back and causes weaknesses that can make us prone to injuries. I don't know anybody who really sits up nice and straight while sitting down, do you? Posture is critical for optimal health and for longevity. Sitting is now considered to be the new smoking. It is not the news. They've sold you a lie when they tried to program you by telling you it's the news. They are lying to you because before they even present one story, they're trying to sell you the idea that opinions and stories are the news. The stories may or may not even be true, right? Even if they are true, the stories don't have anything to do with you or me. On top of that, since it's not exhaustive, meaning it encapsulates literally everything that happened on the planet, it can't be called the news. In reality, it's some news. It's somebody's news. But then, whose news is it, really? They want you to believe it's your news. They try as hard as they can to get you involved emotionally with the stories that they present to you. If they can hook your attention through emotion and identification, they can continue to program and propagandize you, all with your own consent. As soon as you stop identifying emotionally with what is happening on that box in your room, the more power you will have in your life. It was challenging for me to give up my TV, but it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made. It causes you to be more negative and fearful. I'm sure many of you can relate to the story I shared at the beginning of this article. I don't need to prove this to you or to anybody. We all know from personal experience that if you watch the news on a regular basis for an extended amount of time, you'll just start to see the world differently. I know that's the case with me, and I'm pretty sure it's the same with you. You start to see people as separate. You start to have biases and stories you've created about them. You put them in certain categories, and then you label that category, and then put all these people into it. Fear is one of the most psychologically powerful ways to manipulate the human mind and create dependency on authority. The best way to get people afraid is to give them stories that appear to be true, which further facilitates a deep subconscious fear that they've already have lying dormant within them, and then capitalize on that. When I traveled around the world for a year back in 2002, one of the biggest things that stood out to me once I disconnected from the American propaganda machine was a lack of fear. I didn't watch the news or much TV at all, and I found my life to be very peaceful and serene during that year. It was much different than how the American media told me how the world worked. When you eliminate the news from your life, you can get on with making your own news. You can only create and control that which is going on in your own life, and that is the real news, not what some media corporation and company is trying to get you to emotionally invest in. You're exposed to advertisements. As Americans, we're exposed to hundreds of ads per day. Everybody is pining to get in your wallet. They're practically fighting with one another in their attempt to get inside that wallet of yours. What's in your wallet represents your time, your sweat, your energy. These units of exchange are the lifeblood of companies that will stop at nothing to get you to hand it all over to them. They'll make you feel guilty. They'll make you feel like you're not enough. They'll make you feel happy. They'll make you feel sad. They'll try to manipulate you or hijack your emotions and get you to hand it all over to them. They don't care about you. They don't want to improve your life. It's just about the bottom line for them. Money out, money in, ROI, return on investment. All of these products they're trying to sell don't make you a better person, more satisfied with how your life is going, do they? Personally, I don't like being exposed to that many ads in a day. I realize it's not easy to live in a world where you don't see commercials, but if I have some ability to limit my exposure, I'm going to take it. The tracking issue. A while ago, I listened to a podcast where the idea of privacy was being discussed. They mentioned many different scenarios where people were being tracked digitally. Most of us are familiar with the story of Edward Snowden and how he leaked secret government information about how we're all being tracked. I've even heard some of our guests claim that there are special chips in these new digital TV monitors that record your conversations. Erin over at Health Nut News recently posted a video on Facebook that showed some interesting things going on with her phone as a result of her coverage of all those natural doctors being murdered. And it seems as though Amazon Echo is doing some strange things regarding our spending and speech habits. I wouldn't be surprised if it recorded all of our conversations in our homes. Our cell phones are also doing the same thing, I imagine. Obviously, I can't prove any of this. It's just conjecture. I will say, though, that there's not enough upside to watch the news. I don't see any benefits in my life in that way. I mean, where is the benefit? Who's making your agenda? At the end of the day, the news, just like any other TV show, is simply just a business. It's about views and the bottom line, right? They don't care what they're pumping out as long as you're watching it. And their advertisers are making sales from your viewership. I do believe there's a higher agenda at play here when it comes to the news, though. Many people have called this psychological warfare or social manipulation through media. Is it any wonder that there are more lifestyle stories on the news now and opinion pieces where specific news anchors are highlighted instead of the news itself? If we identify with a newscaster the same way we would with a movie or TV personality, we will watch the news simply because we like that newscaster. I have to ask myself, if I were in charge of distilling and disseminating the news to people, what would I want the mass consciousness to believe? If you lack consciousness yourself, your goal might be to get people addicted and afraid, right? You would create the problem, the reaction, and the solution, which is to keep tuning in for critical updates. It's just the classic Hegelian dialectic. I'm not mad at these people. They're simply living in their own hell that has been created by their own fears. Maybe if I grew up the way they did and lacked awareness, I'd do the same thing. But we're all human, right? Since I can see it for what it is, I choose not to participate in their socialization program called The News. It creates dissatisfaction. The programming here is very subtle, but every word spoken, every color used, every transition from one story to another, and every story itself is programming. There's a reason why certain stories make the news while other stories don't, right? There's a reason why certain news anchors get chosen to report specific stories. There's a reason to what they wear and what colors they have on. When we get subjected to all this programming, it alters our view of the world. It's very subtle, but all of the fear combined with the commercials creates a strong feeling that we just aren't good enough. It makes us feel like we're not living up to the standards of others, right? We generally feel like we should have done more. We should have accomplished more. We deserve more. Our life isn't good enough because we don't have enough. We lack. And because we lack, we continue to compete with others that are our age. We fear we will never live up to their standards or be as successful as they are. Life becomes about fear and fighting for survival. We feel like we have to be against our peers, and so we try to out-earn them. It's a subtle trap. It's very strange how you have a low vibration after watching the news, isn't it? Somehow you just aren't happy after you watch the news as you were before you started watching the news. There have been times after I've watched a half hour of the news, I just felt down. I didn't really know what it was, but I just didn't feel right. I felt like the world was scary. I felt like the economy might collapse or the government was going to come and get me. I remember I felt just afraid and powerless. I was young at the time, so I didn't know where all these feelings were coming from because they were all hidden in the subtle programming of the news stories. When you break free of all that programming, it's amazing how optimistic you start becoming. You realize there's so much good happening in the world today. You don't have to try as hard to have a good attitude. You're just happier by nature. People are helping one another. People are spreading love to one another. And amazing things are happening every single day, but we don't hear about that because it's just not good business. People keep, quote, tuning in for some kind of false protection from a fear that was manufactured by the people reporting on the events themselves. Can you see the weird cycle here? Personally, I feel much better simply just not knowing what's going on in the world. I create my own reality every single day. I don't need a corporation to tell me what's going on in the world. I live in my world and I create my world every day. I'd rather choose not to participate in fear, depression, and powerlessness. It's all lies anyway. After reading the book called A People's History of the United States many years ago, I started to learn about the propaganda machine that was the mainstream media. You don't have to do much research on YouTube to uncover all the fake news stories out there. There are a wide array of them, from the fake Sandy Hook story to 9/11 to just about every mainstream story out there. For example, when I see something on the screen that says live when they're reporting a certain event, I always ask myself, how easy would it be to recreate this behind a green screen? If it's fairly easy to recreate a story in a studio like the fake ISIS people beheading supposedly innocent Americans, why wouldn't they do that if it pushes an agenda? There's obviously a lot of upside to creating such stories. Even if all those stories are true, the major news media stories are guilty of not reporting on all the good events that happen every day around the world, right? Either way you slice it, you're being sold fear and propaganda. With technology today, it's getting more and more difficult to determine if people are actually saying what it seems like they're saying when they're on TV. If you can't trust what's going on with the news, why would you choose to participate in the very lies they're trying to impart to you? Any way you look at it, the news is a huge waste of time, and in my opinion, it's a big dog and pony show designed to make you feel fearful and powerless. Personally, my life has been greatly enhanced by taking Nancy Reagan's motto of just say no. Well, thanks, Nancy. I'll take your advice on that one. If you want to read this story, check out all of the links, videos, and images contained within it, as well as to leave a comment, go to